So first of all, welcome to the first. I think this is the first ever Planet Waves video class. I've done quite a few audio classes and various videos, but as far as a class environment, and this could work. This could work pretty good. Let's see. Just have a feeling. So the reason that can we let's talk about the barbecue diagram for a second as kind of a warm up to talking about astrology. And feel free to unmute yourself, especially if there's not a lot of noise in your background. If there is, definitely mute yourself. But does and how Eli, how's hand raising work?
I think it's yeah, if you hit react and then you can choose a little
Okay,
thing, raise hand. There we go.
okay,
Yep, looks like we got it.
then click on their icon.
Yeah, you could hit ask to unmute, just to, drag out that little tile window with all the videos so you can get everyone in there. And
Yep,
then
I've got that. Let's see. Ah, there you are. Okay, so my kind of philosophical warm up for this discussion is to first meditate on this barbecue diagram. Does anyone want to take a shot at what I'm doing with this barbecue diagram? Can we see this thing? Any ideas? Come on. Everyone was
It's
getting it
just
wrong. Everybody was getting it backwards. So yeah, who's that?
Monique, is it your studio?
This?
Yes.
No, it's a diagram for how to assemble a barbecue. It's an exploded view, all
Okay.
the parts to make kind of a gas grill.
Yes.
And I've circulated. You just jumped into the class last night, so we've been bouncing this around all week, and I was asking what relationship you might have thought it had to astrology.
I mean, it's clear here. I thought it was like all the different parts or different planet or a different aspect, and then all those numbers and arrows are like your interpretation or formulation of how they all come together.
Hmm. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's Lisa. All the pieces have to fit to make the fire, to make the barbecue.
That's important. Notate that any one part missing could, well, maybe not any one part missing. There are probably critical and non-critical parts. But there are going to be parts that if you don't have the part, you can't the fire won't start.
I kind of miss this, but like it's to set a fire. Like,
Let's go fire.
yeah, it's to
Yeah,
start a fire to cook something. It's an alchemic process to generate heat to change one thing to another.
interesting. I mean, I could have used a bicycle. Almost any assembly diagram would have worked, but I just happened to find a barbecue diagram, and it's uh, kind of hilariously complicated. But sure, it's sure there's a transformational element to it and all that. But in terms of the engineering of it, the mechanics of it. So, like for example, here's an astrology chart the way that I do it. Right. So there's definitely a difference in the logic of these kind of devices, right?
Well, with the barbecue, you could follow the directions and assemble it as it's instructed, or you could probably find a million other ways to assemble it, the pieces together. And it wouldn't function the same, but you might get a new function from it.
Okay, that's getting warm. But
Mhm.
it's really if I mean I would not want to get anything wrong with this with this thing, and also like if you let's say you start building it and then you think you're done, but you've got three parts left. This is more critical on like rebuilding an engine, where if you got one washer left over at the end, you have to take the entire engine apart and find where that washer goes, because you could turn the car over and just shreds the pistons or something like this, right? So we're starting to we're now in the realm that I am trying to get to. Any other ideas? Now
I feel like
remember,
this has kind of been implied by what some other people have said, but critical and non-critical parts, and also I would say critical and non-critical, perhaps order of operations. Like,
yeah,
yeah, the way that the order that you put things together really matters in whether or not it's going to be functional.
right. Okay, a couple of more thoughts. There's a hard logic to this. Like every single piece is just defined to go in that one specific place and nowhere else. Right? That's the exploded view. It's telling you relationally where every other part goes. And the assembly directions themselves would look different than this. And by the way, this is the factory. This is the factory level. This is not the consumer gets it home and assembles the picnic table. It's a little different. But still, I'm looking for the underlying logic. Right. This is very strict, cold logic. There's one way to do this right. That's what these instructions are saying. It is not designed to have bendable rules or multiple sets of rules. And yes, you could take these parts. I mean, it could be interesting to take them. And I mean, one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema is in the film Apollo 13. I'm sure we've seen this, and I'm not. This is not an endorsement of saying anybody went to the moon, but there's the scene where they've got all the guys from Grumman sitting around the table. They've got the duplicate of the spacecraft on the ground, and they're missing a component. They're mixing a carbon dioxide filter up there and halfway between the moon and the Earth. And I'm sure this is a scene that just blows past most people. But they got all these engineers sitting around the table, and he dumps the box on the table, and he says, "From these parts, we're gonna make a carbon dioxide scrubber, or the guy's gonna come back dead bodies." So there, they've got to apply flexibility to the engineering problem. They've got to be creative. They got to do a lot of square pegs and round holes kind of a thing. But that's not usually the case. Like when we're talking about a thing like this, it's really, this is the one way that it goes together, and that's the way that it goes together, and every part has its name, every part has its place, and the end result is that it's a static object. It may change slowly over time with wear and tear, but basically it's just going to sit there and it's going to do the same thing. And if something goes wrong, you find out which part ain't working and you switch it or you clean it or something, and like you're done. So the joke of that exercise is that the barbecue has absolutely nothing to do with astrology. the logic, the flow, the design concept, the way that you approach the question, there's absolutely no relationship to how we would think astrologically to get a result. I mean, first of all, in astrology, everything is moving. Even if you're looking at a thing where, obviously we could run this through generative AI and it would squirm around, and we can make it do anything now in the age of generative AI, but basically all the planets are moving. And the person whose chart is getting read is moving. The person reading the chart is moving. The planet itself is moving. The planets in real time are moving. Everything's moving. And so could you imagine trying to assemble the barbecue where all the screws are orbiting? It's like, I gotta get that. Well, wait a second. And you're trying to screw it together, but you can't hold the screwdriver in place, because if you loosen your grip a little bit, the screwdriver is going to float. This is what we're talking about when we're doing astrology. And so the idea of astrology is you kind of have to completely let go of this kind of highly linear. It assembles this way and this way only viewpoint. And I do think that if you ask a good few people, they would say, "Oh, well, that's how my chart works. It's this thing, it's this machine of destiny that we put together, and it grinds along, and then out the other end of the sausage factory comes like destiny.
Cool.
But this is not what we're doing with astrology. With astrology, we're in a much more circumspect viewpoint, circumspect mode, right? Circumspect means that an easy way to think of circumspect is there's 12 houses, and to do any kind of a thorough reading, you eventually have to consider all the houses. Now, in any one reading, you're unlikely to consider all the houses. The part of what we're going to do today is learn how to read a house, and then there'll be pretend this is your natal chart. There'll be things like you just don't understand your sixth house, and then you because you don't have to put the whole barbecue together because you're going to grill some salmon that night. You can wait. You can take your sixth house, and it can sit there for a while. Years sometimes. You don't understand what's going on. In my sixth house, I've got a Ceres in the 30th degree of Sagittarius. Like, that could mean a few things. The other thing going on in a chart is that unlike I'm so used to having the double screens up. We'll get there next time. Unlike in a barbecue diagram, the barbecue itself. You couldn't really say, if you could stretch philosophically and say, well, this part all the way down here bears a relationship to this part over here, and this one over here, and this one over here, right? That's not really how it works with a barbecue, right? You could probably ask like a really smart 11-year-old to say, you could come up with a story that connects, these parts together. But it's bullshit because it's not going to help. It's not going to help you make dinner. But when we're talking about a chart, really any chart, it's you could find a relationship between any point and any other point, and you could either wax philosophically or bullshit convincingly that there is a relationship between any 2 points in the entire chart. And if there and including all of these numbers out here. And so I think this is really what makes astrology into something completely unique in all the world, which is that in theory, every part has a relationship to every other part. So you could pick things that don't seem like they're in any known aspect or have any special relationship, and you isolate that and you start to look closely, and you will begin to get material. You're going to come up with information. You're going to come up with ideas. And so one of the really beautiful things about astrology is this factor, and it's how, if you were to take, there are as many, maybe I should have two of me joining in. Is that possible, Eli? Hold on. I had an idea back in there somewhere. Okay, so I was talking about if you took every symbol in this chart, the 1, the 5, the Taurus, the 4, the 5, this is in equal houses, all of these numbers, all of these symbols, all of this, add this all up, you'd end up with about enough characters to fill a paragraph or two of the New York Times. Not very much. But you can take a chart like this, and you can go on and on almost endlessly about this chart. You can read this chart from 12, which is what I do for something like a horoscope column or the spring reading. Now the chart is oriented in Libra, and now just turn it, and now it's oriented for Scorpio. When it was oriented for Libra, Mars is in the 10th house, and then you turn the thing, and it's oriented for Scorpio, and suddenly Leo, where the heck did Leo go? Somewhere. Leo's in the 10th house. It's a whole different chart. It's a whole completely different chart. Right? Can you see that? If you start with Scorpio as your first house, where the heck is this? Scorpio is house 1, then Sag is on 2 and Capricorn is on 3, and if you turn it to Virgo rising, suddenly you've got a Virgo rising orientation. You've got Jupiter up here in the right on the 10th right there because it's Gemini, and you've got This is complicated. This is crazy. Doing this upside down. Uh, we getting the idea here that every time you turn this chart, you change all the relationships, all the significations change. And then before that happens, every point has a potential relationship to every other point. This is a really cool system of notation. I mean, it's completely amazing that there's a method of notation that accomplishes this, that is effectively holographic in nature, and and that is eminently flexible. It's so flexible that the most important thing to guard against as an astrologer is kind of forcing an interpretation on something which you could convince yourself of, and which you could potentially convince someone else of. And since astrologers don't, it's quite rare that they have a panel, and you go before the panel and you defend your interpretation of the chart, which I once got to do with the 9/11 chart. I was going to say 7/11 chart. With the 9/11 chart, everyone's favorite snack. I went before a panel of like they seemed old astrologers, and I explained my concept of the 9/11 chart, and they knew the rules of horary that I was supposed to be following, and they said, yeah, well, your interpretation checks out. That's quite rare, and we should do a lot more of that, of taking your view of any mundane chart, and it could work with well-established, famous dead celebrities also. We'll have two today. And test the theory. So one of the things I'm proposing as a starting point for astrology is that the knowledge gained from astrology is very different from this kind of knowledge. This is kind of one and done, and you've got to get it right, or the thing doesn't light up, and everyone's just, you got a bunch of raw hamburgers, and there's nothing to cook them on. But this has a single purpose: to get the thing together and start the grill. This can have any number of purposes, right? I mean, let's say you're born, and right at the time you're born, a car gets a parking ticket outside the hospital. I mean, that's happened before, and it's the exact same chart. I mean, just real coincidence that the minute you're born and the baby, you start crying, and then there's a parking ticket. Well, one chart is for a parking ticket, one part is for an entire human life, but it's going to be the same chart. So the context absolutely, totally matters. The context of reading astrology is one of the most important questions in all of astrology. Is what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? And so we've got this. Everything's a moving part in astrology. And so, including the philosophical motion of the thinking process, the learning, the logic, and I have charts hanging up on my wall here. A couple of them belong to you guys. That I'll just keep looking at that chart every day and saying, what is it about that planet? And then what I find is that's an approach, holding that open, saying, I don't really understand that. Hold it open, and you might hold it open for hours, for days, for weeks. At the beginning of the session, you might not understand it. By the end of the session, the person's told you things that drop the point into context, and suddenly you have a context for it. So another idea we're working with is that meaning means context. So you can make some astrological statement. You can say, Mars stationing direct. What's going on? It's at 165-degree angle, my new favorite aspect, to Pluto and Pallas Athene and all that. And somebody says, well, what's it mean? I mean, people say that to you all the time. Well, what's it mean? And it's important, I think, to kind of McLuhan out and rub your beard and say, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's hold that question open. And so one of the guiding principles I go by with astrology is that it's a much better method, it's a much better tool for asking questions than it is for making declarative statements. And plus, you're on much safer territory when you use the whole thing as a probe, rather than as some kind of like a mechanistic device that says, oops, I've gotten so used to the split screen as some kind of a mechanistic device that says unless you put the barbecue together this way, then you're going to be, calling Uber Eat, whatever, Grubhub, and you're not really going to be having a barbecue. But with a chart, you don't need to have the final, even assuming there is meekly such a thing as an answer to come from a chart. You don't need to have that to be getting use out of the chart. If not specifically actionable information, actionable questions. And a question is a form of information, a very powerful, vital form of information. I think that the right question is worth far, far more than the right answer, because the right question tends to multiply information. The right answer might not be the right answer. It might just be an answer. And typically what happens is people stop thinking when they think they know something. And so astrology will keep throwing you curves, and you'll keep noticing things, even in your own chart, which you've looked at for 5 or 10 or 20 years, and you're like, wow, I never noticed that. Well, I only took up the 165-degree aspect last year when I read this book by Al Morrison, worth reading. And I noticed that I have a 165-degree aspect in my chart between Venus and Pluto, and so does my father. Except we manifested differently. My father got married 8 times. I never got married, and I'm a photographer. So we manifested it differently, but you could see a similar underlying energy. But I thought, I really don't need to get married. I don't need to sign half the law library with one signature. But I think that's it's worth a whole article to make this comparison between my chart and my dad's chart. But again, the similar aspect, the signs are going to be different because it's Pluto. Different meaning, different context. But there's still some underlying order in that. There's still some, think Pluto, Venus. Like that's you get a combination. Morrison, by the way, had a Venus-Pluto conjunction. So anyway, we're in totally different mind space, and I think that back to the nope. Here's what we want. I want like AI to help me here. That the logic of the world is more based on this. And I have a hunch that people approach astrology thinking that it's kind of like this. Oh, this is how it all fits together. And then we get one answer in the form of dinner. Now, I think somewhat humorously, HD, human design, has more of the let's assemble the barbecue right mentality. And I think, God, these people, they sure are prescriptive. And the problem with my critique of HD is that it still keeps yielding good information. So I have not been tempted to master it, but I'm always interested in the viewpoint of people who know HD. But HD is so much more like, nope, you've got that crossed, you've got that thing, you've got that in that degree, that's what that means, that's what that says. Maybe I'm wrong, but all the HD people I know say, if you're a manifesting generator, you say uh-huh a lot. And so you see them sitting there in the videos all saying uh-huh, uh-huh. And I'm like, stop. That's not how it's supposed to work. Or even funnier, you'll get a chart for like the boat crashing into the bridge and wherever it was, Baltimore. And someone will say, wow, what an accurate chart. They must have done electional astrology and crashed the boat into the bridge exactly at that time. It's like, that's not what we're doing here. We're divining. Now, it's not that they planned it that way. No one's using electional astrology except for me and maybe a couple of you. So they're not planning this stuff. When we get to the 9/11 chart and we start to kind of splunk around that chart, we're going to see some things that sure look like it was pretty darn planned for that moment. But when you think about it logistically, that's a ridiculous concept. Too many moving parts, and nobody fucking cares about astrology except for us. So, having said all this, one of the first things you want to do with astrology is think about how you want to approach the chart. Now, one of the problems we have with astrology is that since we've kind of all been alive, psychological astrology has been the thing. Dane Rudhyar starts this all off in the 1960s. So he's pretty much, and I track back through this with Melanie Reinhart, we went back through the history of this and we're like, well, because she's clearly a psychological astrologer. Liz Green, that whole school, psychological astrology. We think that's all there is. That's part of the problem with astrology right now, is we think all there is psychological astrology, where you're studying people's motives and you're looking at how they think and how they feel and all that. And you can get some of that with astrology, but it's more interesting to get it from the person. But I think that, I mean, of course, I'm a news-oriented astrologer, but I don't skimp on the natal astrology. But I think that being able to work with a mundane chart is a very important skill in the reading of all astrology. And before there's mundane astrology, there's horary astrology, which is, for example, casting a chart at the moment you understand the nature of a question. And when you cast for is could be an interesting discussion, but essentially it can be like the mailman knocks on the door and you open up the client's letter and then you cast a chart for that, or you cast a chart for a phone call that you got. Those are highly informative and useful forms of astrology, and the discipline required to do so is very helpful in reading natal charts, because it compels a close look at the chart in detail that's very often left out of the chart. And so without going to the barbecue diagram, there are ways to get into the chart. You think of them like gambits, a kind of a New York Times word for an opening move in a game. And how do you start reading the chart? Like, where do you go in to get information? So there's a few ways to do that. And one of the ways is that for example, with a natal chart, it's always fair to look at the rising sign, look at the planet that rules the rising sign, and figure out what's going on with that planet. And then you're in. And that includes the house that planet's in. It includes the aspects that it's making, and then suddenly you have a way into the kind of matrix where now you're much more inside the chart than looking at it from the outside, and you're feeling out all these different all these different concepts in the chart. So why don't we do this let's do a little bit of this with the 9/11 chart, and I hope some of you have had a chance to take a look at it. And one of the reasons I picked the 9/11 chart is because now, after 24 years, we pretty much know what didn't happen. We pretty much know that you can't knock a 105-story skyscraper down by poking an airplane into it way, way, way up at the top, because buildings are held up from the bottom. So why did the bottom fall down if the top was broken? And we know building 7, we know that no airplane hit that at all. So, and it fell down. So we know that there's now, a quarter of a century on, it's fair to say that there's a problem with the official story. It's not like trying to claim viruses don't exist in 2021. Get smacked around for that. We're way, way into this, and I've personally interviewed people who understand the engineering to the point where I understand the engineering. So now we know we're working with a chart for probable fraud. But how would we have seen that at the time? So the first thing you see with this chart is that there's a planet rising. And this hints that starting with the ascendant is a pretty good place to start reading any chart. It's just a way into the chart. You're eventually going to go everywhere. Sooner or later, you're going to go everywhere. But the ascendant is a good place to start, and we see that Mercury is rising in this chart. And not only is Mercury rising, you can see that it's rising to 7 arc minutes. 7 arc minutes. That's like about an eighth of a degree or something like that. That is crazy. And you could surmise certain things from that. But let's not surmise anything yet. And here's a good place to bring in the difference between an astrological fact and an astrological interpretation. It's an astrological fact to say that Mercury is rising, right? Mercury is rising. You can't do nothing about it. It's not only that, it's rising to only about 7 minutes of arc, but it's an interpretation to say Mercury is rising. This is a message. You following me here on the difference between the two? It's the therefore that makes it the interpretation. So there's no getting around the fact, I mean, anything in this hemisphere is rising. But when I say it's rising, I'm talking about in the degree of the ascendant. Now, just plain on its face, that's kind of like the barbecue part that just tells you about the whole barbecue. You almost don't need to go any further. But let's go a little bit further. So you check the ruling planet of the ascendant, and you wind up with Libra's ruled by Venus. This is why the ruleships are so important. And we've got Venus in Leo, nice and happy, represents whatever. That Venus and Leo don't look like a terrorist attack. Venus and Leo, and if you go to the Sabian symbol, it's a houseboat party. So what's going on? Somewhere there's a houseboat party going on of a kind, metaphorically, right? The Sabians are not going to tell you, but Venus in the 11th in Leo is kind of like, it's kind of a party. It looks like a lot of fun, right? If somebody said to you, come to this event, and you look and you saw that it was Libra rising, Venus and Leo, you might say, oh, that's going to be a great party. Venus is in Leo. So keeping that in mind, there's a second ruler of Libra, and that would be Saturn, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. So now we go to Saturn, and you don't have to understand what something is. If you just sit there, if you've got a chart you don't understand, including a natal chart of a person, and you just go through this process where you're like, oh, that's the ascendant, that's the ruler, okay, there's a second ruler, that's Saturn, oh, Saturn's there, oh, that's nice, don't worry about what it means. What it means will start to come to you when you're ready. You will be told what you need to know. So in this case, wow, that's interesting. Saturn's there, and you might catch structure, Gemini, twin structures. Wow, twin tower, the 9th house, the house associated with the world. Oh, world twin tower. It can be hilarious. Astrology can be brutally, hilariously literal sometimes. You kind of wish it was all the time, but there are times when it's just hysterical. And that includes the Sabian symbol in the Sabian. No, there's an asteroid there. Sorry, not the Sabian symbol. There's an asteroid here, right conjunct Mercury, called Sauer, Sauer, and we'll come to that. There's a whole astrological joke in this asteroid. So now we're hop, skipping, and jumping through the rulerships, and there are some modern astrologers who this just pisses off. They're going to do it new. They're going to issue the corrected tarot deck. They're going to fix all the little things they think are wrong in the Kabbalah, sure. And I say the classical astrology level is a good place to start. Just start there. What are you going to do? What's going to happen? So you go from Venus to Libra, rather Libra to Venus, Libra to Saturn, Saturn, twin things in Gemini, to Pluto. Ooh, that's interesting. The unstoppable force. And now we're starting to tell a story. It just kind of pops out. This opposition as my old friend Lane Andrus said, what do you didn't think something was going to happen? Because everybody acted surprised. And that's what she said. She's witty girl. What were you expecting? Pluto opposite Saturn. So Another thing you're looking for is, especially in mundane, is what about, no, especially in all forms of astrology, what about this chart says anything about the thing that we're talking about? And so initially, and we're going to do this with, we're going to start with Robert Heinlein, and we're doing it now, there's a matching game. There's a matching game. And you don't need to go deep to do this. This is, I think, a tremendous misunderstanding in astrology, thinking that that you're immediately driving toward a conclusion rather than just kind of fitting. It's kind of like wiggling the chart and seeing, like, does the shoe fit at all? What's going on here? And sometimes you have to hang out with it for a while to see all the interesting ways that it fits. And by the way, I forgot to say, it helps to have a question. I began with this a week or two ago, saying astrology is divination. Divination calls for a question. Astrology is much, much easier to do for yourself, for someone else, or for some mundane situation. When you have a question you're trying to answer, you know what you're looking for. You know what you know which acorns you're gathering. Even though you're holding the question open, the question will guide your pursuit of information, and there's an inherent bias in that, and then you work with that bias. Okay, so far we've got a chart that looks pretty useful. We've got a thing with wings. First of all, the whole thing's about a thing with wings hitting something. We've got Mercury. Mercury's got wings. So, well, that's interesting, right? I mean, just, I know that as astrologers we've seen this kind of thing before, but isn't that wild? That for the moment, a thing like the most famous plane crash in history, flying thing hitting some other thing, the frickin' chart has Mercury rising. Mercury being distinguished by his ability to fly. What happened? Mercury being distinguished by his ability to fly. So we've got, this is in horary, this is called a test of radicality. You're just making sure that the chart actually fits into the scenario that you're describing. Now there's, if you go look through the medieval books and all, those people, the millennial fundamentalist astrologers, they may give you a test of radicality that involves looking at the planetary hour and following the rule of the planetary hour, matching that. I take a little bit simpler approach to the test of radicality is, does this chart seem like a picture of what it is? And yeah, let's not go too far down the horary path, but that's really the question, I think, of any chart. Is this seem like what it purports to be? I mean, I once put Betty Dodson's chart up this may be the only astrology class I've ever taught without Betty's chart, but I put the chart up blind and said, what's this a chart for? And somebody said, is it Jane Fonda? Clearly they're involved in movies. Okay, that's pretty good. Betty definitely was a filmmaker. So you can go from the other end of things. But when you've got the chart and you think you know what it's about, this, whatever that means, whatever the 9/11 incident means, you try to fit it together and see if it will stand up to that. And this is it's kind of a very important kid level of the whole exercise. So it turns out that the thing that gives away this chart is that Mercury is making an aspect to one of the rulers of the ascendant. And once you see this, and once you know this, you cannot unsee it or unknow it. It'll just kind of change your whole perception of things. So we've got, and you're marking on the chart, tell you where you've been, right? This is why it's so important to mark the chart. You're leaving a record of where you've been with the chart. And you can start with a new chart, but you still got, each read, you've got a set of things. And when I put the mark in, that's like, I noticed that. Oh, I noticed that. So let's go to this concept. We've got Mercury rising here on the pin to the degree. We've got Saturn connected to Libra. The exaltations are very important in any form of astrology. They give you a whole second set of rulerships that you can work with. Then you can get into Alice Bailey and really drive yourself crazy with two more sets of rulerships. But let's just stick to exaltation. Well, we notice here that Saturn is at 14 and change, 14 degrees, 45 minutes, and we've got the rising signs at 1422, and that's at 1417. God damn, that's close. How did that happen? Like, you're not doing astrology until you can stare at the chart and say, that's fucking impossible. There's no way this can be here. But here we are. Now, Mercury presumably represents the secret enemy. Now, you don't have to memorize all these rules. Just follow the logic through, and then you can map it out again. 12th house represents the secret enemy. Secret enemy. Let's put the word secret there. 7th, incidentally, indicates the open enemy. And notice they are mirroring one another. They're both above the horizon. This is my mirror houses theory. So we've got, this happens to be the open enemy's house. This happens to be the secret enemy's house. Clearly, the question of the 9/11 incident is, who done it? We know what happened, more or less. The buildings aren't there anymore. And we were told something, and we were told someone done it. Who done it? So in the who done it, we find out that Mercury rules the 12th house. We're going to come back to Gemini in a quick second. And we have Mercury in Libra, and we have Saturn in Gemini. That is a mutual reception, technically called quote unquote mixed reception, but that's like a book review that gave it a good review and a bad review. So I don't really use the word mixed reception. I'm just going to stick to mutual reception. Mercury and Saturn are in one another's signs. That's even crazier. And Mercury, the presumed terrorist, is taking the place, it's switching places with mutual reception. Planets can be said to switch places. Saturn generally, organically, is a ruling planet of the government, regardless of what house we're talking about. Well, then we're looking at a chart where the planet representing the terrorist and one of the planets representing the government switch places. They're acting as one thing. They're one and the same thing. Now, it was one thing to talk about this on like September 12th, when you thinking, if you say anything that's going to be black helicopters surrounding your house. That was the feeling on September 12th. That if you don't genuflect to George W. Bush, the men in black are going to be knocking on your door. 24 years later, we know there was a problem, and you've got like vast public surveys with half the American public or something thinking, oh, the government was in on it. The government had knowledge. But the astrology, while it does not prove anything, is saying there's going to be a little switcheroo going on when you've got the planet representing the terrorists also switching places with the planet representing the government. Now, there's more in this chart. Let's stop and talk about this. Any thoughts on this? Any questions here? We've done a lot with this chart in just 5 minutes. Any thoughts? Anybody want to tear the theory down? Anything like that? Come on.
I just
I have a
Yes.
question. How did you get to Mercury is the terrorist?
Oh, easy. Okay, so, and remember, this is a standard maneuver. The 12th house, which is Virgo, because Libra's rising, so anything in Virgo is the 12th, but it also happens to be on the 12th cusp, so it works both ways. The one of the topical delineations of the 12th is the secret enemy. Therefore, planetary ruler of the 12th, which is Virgo, leading to Mercury, gives you a kind of identikit sketch of the terrorist as Mercury or the conspirators. Did you follow that?
I did not because my internet went out.
What happened?
Uh-oh.
Hmm. Okay, I think maybe her connection's a little shaky.
So
Okay, yeah,
even
she's
though
having internet issues.
I'm
Okay, so she'll be back in a minute. Anyone else want to follow up on this line of thought? Can we
I'm
walk
just
through this again to how we got to Mercury as the symbol? It's a symbol of the terrorist.
the sun is in Virgo and Virgo's ruled by Mercury. Was that
Nope,
it?
doesn't matter. The sun doesn't matter, but
Okay.
it can come in. It's that the 12th house cusp is through Virgo.
Oh, because it's assumed they're telling us it's a terrorist, so we go to the house of secret foreigners, 12th house.
Yep.
Okay,
Oh, it definitely was terrorism of some kind.
sure. So we're telling it's terrorist, and so we know because we know what the houses represent. We
Yes.
go to that house that represents terrorist, foreign affairs, da da da. And
And
then we
secret
go,
enemies, secret enemies.
okay.
Yes, foreign affairs, terrorists, anything cloak and dagger, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we've got a context for this chart, which is
Right.
there's
Gotcha.
a situation unfolding that manifested at 8:46 a.m. So the fact of the 12th house, the sun in the 12th, excellent observation. Inherently, the sun rules the president.
Hmm.
Now, this could mean a couple of things. Um, First of all, it puts the president in the 12th house.
Oh,
And that, see, my observation is that they had to leave Bush, shrub, W, baby Bush, out of the planning. She was too loose cannon, too dumb. And plus, you always want plausible deniability with the executive. Where the buck stops. Now, I was not there. He was definitely briefed by the CIA on August 5th or 6th saying there would be terrorist attack, but that was part of the setup, right? I think that was part of the setup. We're a bit outside the scope, but we do have to account for what it would mean to have the sun in the 12th. And that I would say that it means either that the executive, the sun, the king, was either in on it or kept in the dark, but there's no denying that he's involved. And I would say that the sun in the 12th most certainly argues, whether I like it or not, that Shrub was in this conspiracy, which takes place in the 12th house. And I don't think there's any hard evidence of this. And it kind of doesn't matter. Clearly, Cheney, who was it? The guy from Enron wrote, Dear President Cheney. Remember that? Just kidding. Ha ha. Dear President Musk. So we've got the planet affiliated with the terrorists in mutual reception with Saturn, a planet associated with government authority, and they're in mutual reception. And that is saying this is not kosher.
so I have a question, Eric.
Yes.
When you said there's an aspect without, like, when I'm looking at this chart, is it because they're both at 14 degrees?
Yes, it's a perfect trine.
Okay.
Now,
Through 1, 2, 3 houses or 4 houses? Four
what do you
houses.
mean?
It's a trine, meaning that they have the same degree.
It's a trine meaning it's 120 degrees.
Okay, there we go. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Yep.
sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
14 and change Libra to 14 and change Mercury, air to air. That is a
Wow.
trine. And as I said in my email, I don't put trines in here because you don't need it. You can see it, and then you can just draw it in yourself in this. Oops, sorry. In this relationship, you just draw it in. You don't need it in here. You want in here for like the weird stuff.
Right.
See a sesquiquadrate. Who can see a quindecile? You can't really see a semi-square. That's easy, one of the easier ones to see. But this is telling you the subtle things to look for, which we don't need right now in this interpretation.